Supreme Court says Fed's Cook can keep her job for now, but it upholds other Trump firings. Add AP News as your preferred source to see more of our stories on Google. Add AP News on Google. Add AP News as your preferred source to see more of our stories on Google. Share Washington Act. The Supreme Court on Monday dramatically expanded presidential power, upholding President Donald Trump's firings of the heads of independent federal agencies with one important exception: the Federal Reserve. The justices allowed Fed Governor Lisa Cook to stay in her job while she fights the Republican president's effort to fire her over allegations of mortgage fraud, which she has denied. But other than at the nation's central bank, with its role of setting interest rates, the court held that presidents have free rein to fire agency heads at will, despite federal laws that require a cause for such dismissals and a 91-year-old decision that had limited executive authority. With the 6 conservative justices in the majority, the 9-member court jettisoned its unanimous decision in Humphrey's executor that had limited when presidents can fire agencies' board members, in part to try to ensure decision-making free of political influence. We hold that such protection from removal is contrary to the separation of powers enshrined in the Constitution, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for the court. Support for Trump's position, the justices ruled in the case of former Federal Trade Commission member Rebecca Slaughter, whom Trump fired without cause despite a provision of federal law that requires a reason. The logic of the decision extends to other agencies, including the National Labor Relations Board, the Merit Systems Protection Board, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission, where Trump also has fired board members. Rebecca Slaughter, Federal Trade Commissioner, holds her newborn daughter Hattie as she testifies via video conference during a Senate committee hearing in 2020. AP photo/Jacqueline Martin. Rebecca Slaughter, Federal Trade Commissioner, holds her newborn daughter Hattie as she testifies via video conference during a Senate committee hearing in 2020. AP photo/Jacqueline Martin. Add AP News on Google. Add AP News as your preferred source to see more of our stories on Google. Share Facebook, copy link, copied print, email, X, LinkedIn, Bluesky, Flipboard, Pinterest, Reddit. Read more. Trump voiced his approval in a Truth Social post. It is such an honor to be the sitting president who won this historic and unprecedented ruling, one of the most important ever given with respect to presidential powers, he wrote. The court already had signaled its support for the Trump administration's position over the liberals' objection by allowing Slaughter and the board members of other agencies to be removed from their jobs even as their legal challenges continued. No president before Trump had sought to wrest control of the agencies that regulate wide swaths of American life, including nuclear energy, product safety, and labor relations. But at arguments in Slaughter's case in December, the 6 conservatives, including 3 appointed by Trump, seemed more concerned about issuing a ruling that would endure than handing too much power to Trump. Read more. Their rhetoric was reminiscent of the presidential immunity case in 2024 that allowed Trump to avoid prosecution for his efforts to undo his 2020 presidential election loss to Democrat Joe Biden. The court is writing a decision for the ages, Justice Neil Gorsuch said then. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, in a dissent she summarized aloud in the courtroom, said the ruling could lead to submission, instability, and even oppression. The president, to be sure, emerges with more power than ever before. That power was given to him by 6 justices on this court, not the people or the Constitution, Sotomayor said. Fed Governor Cook's case. In Cook's case, the court voted 5-4 to reject the Trump administration's effort to get Cook out of her job now. Roberts, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and the 3 liberal justices were in the majority. Allowing Cook to be ousted now, Roberts wrote, would allow the president to remove a member of the Federal Reserve at any time, for any reason, without any notice before, and without any judicial check after. That would turn for cause protection into little more than at-will employment. In this Jan. 29, 2020, file photo. Chief Justice John Roberts departs at the end of the day in the impeachment trial of President Donald Trump on charges of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress on Capitol Hill in Washington. AP photo/Patrick Szymanski, file. In this Jan. 29, 2020, file photo Chief Justice John Roberts departs at the end of the day in the impeachment trial of President Donald Trump on charges of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress on Capitol Hill in Washington. AP photo / Patrick Szymanski. File add AP News on Google. Add AP News as your preferred source to see more of our stories on Google. Share Facebook, copy link copied print, email X linked and Blue Sky Flipboard, Pinterest, Reddit. Read more. Roberts did include a footnote in his opinion, noting that nothing forbids Trump from trying again to fire her, provided she is given proper notice and a chance to contest it. Trump suggested he would take Roberts up on the offer, saying on Truth Social that we will take appropriate action immediately to make sure that someone who has committed wrongdoing will not be making vital decisions concerning the welfare of the United States of America. Cook, who was nominated to the Fed's Board of Governors by Biden, can continue in her post at least as long as her lawsuit challenging her firing goes on, the court said. The Trump administration is appealing a lower court ruling in her favor. Besides trying to fire Cook, Trump had threatened to fire former Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell if he didn't leave the board when his term as chairman ended in mid-May. Powell has remained as a governor, even as Kevin Walsh has replaced him as chairman. Judges on lower courts have allowed Cook to remain in her post as one of 7 central bank governors. The true motivation for trying to fire Cook, Trump's critics say, is the Republican president's desire to exert control over U.S. interest rate policy. If Trump succeeds in removing Cook, the first black woman to be a Federal Reserve governor, he could replace her with his own appointee and gain a majority on the Fed's board. The case is being closely watched by Wall Street investors and could have broad impacts on the financial markets and the U.S. economy. Cook said her case was never about mortgage documents signed years before I became a Federal Reserve governor. It was an attempt to remove me on a manufactured pretext because I refused to bow to political pressure and continued to set interest rates based only on what would best serve the American people. That is the most fundamental obligation of a Federal Reserve governor, Cook said in a statement. Trump's confrontation with the Fed. Trump has been dismissive of worries that cutting rates too quickly could trigger higher inflation. He wants dramatic reductions so the government can borrow more cheaply and Americans can pay lower borrowing costs for new homes, cars, or other large purchases, as worries about high costs have soured some voters on his economic management. The Fed has left its key rate unchanged this year, but a growing chorus of policymakers is expressing concern about persistently high inflation and suggesting the central bank